You deserve this for standing up to me, you worthless wife. Christopher yelled and threw me into the shed. I fell and hit my back against something, groaning in pain. Meanwhile, Christopher shut the door. The shed was engulfed in darkness in an instant. I leaped towards the door and pounded on it fiercely. But it didn't open. It seemed like Christopher did something from the outside. The door felt heavy, and I was overwhelmed by a sense of despair. Was this all my fault? No, I had been aware of Christopher's flamboyant affairs even when we were dating, but I turned a blind eye. Because I loved him. But everyone has their breaking point. Today was mine. When I confronted Christopher about his cheating, he flipped out, leading to this mess. I won't forgive him. No matter what, I will get out of here and make Christopher realize his mistake. But I can't think of a plan. As I'm overwhelmed by my raging emotions, I hear the door open. My name is Mariah. I'm a 44-year-old housewife. I live with my husband Christopher, who is 5 years younger than me. We don't have kids because Christopher didn't want any. I had always dreamt of becoming a mom, but by the time I got married, I was already 35, an age when pregnancy becomes challenging. But now, I think it's probably for the best. Christopher would have too many issues as a dad, and I can't imagine dealing with a child in my current mental state. I met Christopher 12 years ago. I was 32, and he was a youthful 27 years old. We were colleagues, and he often affectionately called me Mariah. I was immediately attracted to Christopher. He was good-looking, cheerful, and friendly. But I couldn't exactly call myself beautiful, and considering our age difference, I didn't think I stood a chance. Then, out of the blue, Christopher confessed his feelings for me. I couldn't believe it, but I was overjoyed and quickly accepted. Our relationship started smoothly. Christopher was understanding about my insecurities regarding my age and appearance. Don't worry about that, he said. I was happy. The reason Christopher chose me was a mystery, but as long as I believed he loved me, it felt like everything was resolved. But it was a sweet illusion. As our first anniversary approached, Christopher's true nature began to reveal itself. He always used the same excuse, I forgot my wallet, making me pay for all our date expenses. Up until then, we had been splitting the bill, so the sudden financial burden hurt. More than that, Christopher's repeated excuses for not paying made me see him as insincere. Once, I decided to beat him to it, and said, I forgot my wallet. Before he said so. It was right after we met up. Christopher responded immediately. Why don't you go get it? Your place is close, right? Close? I took the train here, you know that's not happening. After a nonchalant nod, Christopher turned his back on me. Christopher? If you don't have money, we can't go on a date, right? Let's call it a day. With a wave, he disappeared into the crowd. All I could do was to stand there, dumbfounded. I began to feel uneasy about my relationship with Christopher. Could I ever be happy with him? Even with those doubts, I couldn't leave him. I had a relationship with only one guy before Christopher. The first relationship was during my student days, a brief 6-month affair that ended when he found someone else. As for Christopher, he was quite popular with the women at work. He knew it too, smoothly delegating his tasks to them. He hadn't tried that with me yet, but when would his feelings change? I grew increasingly timid. And even more dependent on Christopher. His smile, his sweet words. I convinced myself they were privileges only for me. But Christopher never understood my desperate clinging. One day at work, I overheard him talking to another male colleague. I'm with Mariah, but she's the best option for now. She's older, but she pays for our dates, even gifts me watches sometimes. If I were to marry, Mariah seems like a good choice. The other two spend too much, no way. Christopher was seeing 2 other women besides me. I secretly hired a detective to investigate him. I wanted to prove what I heard was a mistake. But the reality was harsh. One of Christopher's girlfriends was a colleague. Another worked for a client company. After much contemplation, I chose to overlook Christopher's promiscuity. He had chosen me as his partner for marriage. Perhaps it was because I catered to Christopher, never complaining about his whims. I believed that once we were married, his bad habits would disappear. But after the wedding, he started staying out blatantly. Upon investigation, it was always with women in their early to mid-30s. Christopher was irresistibly drawn to the financial security these women provide and the inferiority these women felt towards him, leading them to devote themselves completely. Christopher had a girlfriend named Carol. When she realized she'd been deceived, she came to apologize to me first. "I'm so sorry. Christopher told me he was single." "It's okay, we're both victims here," I said calmly. Carol was 35. The age I was when I got married. She had been with Christopher for 2 years. For a woman, that's precious time spent on Christopher. It was even sadder knowing she had seriously considered marrying him. Carol promised to break it off with Christopher. I promised to support her if anything happened. That day, Christopher seemed restless. He had a 2-night, 3-day company trip to Los Angeles starting tomorrow. After he finished packing, Christopher tried to hurry back to his room. I was cleaning up after dinner when I suddenly spoke up. "I talked to Carol." "Who's that?" Christopher tilted his head, feigning ignorance. I spread the documents I received from the detective on the table. "I've known for a while that you have been seeing many women." "Mariah, what are you doing?" Christopher lost it. "Yeah, you're right. So what? I gave those girls a good dream. I deserve something in return." Carol was hurt. I mustn't let myself get angry alongside him. I remained calm and said, "She believed you would marry her." "So, what? You gonna divorce me, Mariah? Then maybe I'd consider." "No, forget it. She's not thoughtful enough, and there are better women out there." "Christopher." I was shocked. I expected him to be upset, but to casually talk about divorce and compare Carol like that. "Anyway, Mariah, you know what happens when you cross me, right?" I was confused. Christopher was the one in the wrong. Yet, he acted as if I had broken some rules. He forcefully grabbed my arm, making me stand up, and led me outside. There it was, the shed. He stopped in front of it, flung open the door, and threw me inside. "You deserve this for standing up to me, you worthless wife." I fell and hit my back against something, groaning in pain. "Christopher, you can't be serious." By the time I turned around, Christopher had already shut the door. I rushed to the door in shock, but it wouldn't open. Christopher must have done something from the outside. "Reflect on this. I'm going out." "Wait, Christopher. Please wait." Being locked up here, I couldn't care less about reflection. I would get thirsty and hungry. If I can't get out of here, I'll wither away. And with Christopher leaving for a company trip tomorrow, what will become of me after 3 days of being left here? I had hoped he might let me out soon. But his footsteps faded away, and the yard fell silent. The shed had no windows. With the door shut, the inside was pitch black. A sense of vulnerability crept up from my feet. Had I really done something so terrible? I knew Christopher could be cold-hearted, but I had never imagined it would go this far. Maybe he doesn't care what happens to me. Perhaps he'll actually leave me locked up here while he's on his trip. Then, it happened. Mariah." A soft voice called out. I was startled. The door had opened. There stood Carol, Christopher's ex-girlfriend. She had come to see me. She rang the doorbell but got no response, and noticing noise from the yard, she came to check. "I saw Christopher locking you in here. It's terrible." "It's okay. I chose to be with him, knowing what kind of man he is. This is on me," I said, as if convincing myself. "But I'm grateful. I'm glad you were here." I dated Christopher too, indirectly taking you for granted. That's not true. I slowly shook my head. You didn't know anything. You truly liked Christopher. That's all, right? Just like me. Mariah. Carol looked like she was about to cry, quickly wiping her tears with the back of her hand. I told her, Carol, I need your help. Will you stand up to Christopher with me? Carol looked at me in surprise. Stand up to Christopher? What are you planning? I'll explain it now. After I shared the plan, Carol was shocked but nodded in agreement. Christopher had apparently gone to a friend's house. Once we made sure he wasn't home, Carol and I went back inside the house. The plan would begin with Christopher's return. The day I was locked into the shed and the 3 days of the company trip passed. Christopher came out to the yard. She must be okay, right? He mumbled in front of the shed. Realizing the severity of his actions, he was probably feeling guilty. But it was too late. Hey, Mariah. The reflection time's over. You can come out now. Christopher opened the shed door. The moment he did, his expression froze. He rubbed his eyes as if not trusting what he saw, and looked inside the shed again. The result didn't change. Who are you? In front of Christopher, a woman who was not me sat huddled. In his mind, I had been locked in there the whole time. It was impossible for the clothes or hairstyle to change midway. The woman looked up. Christopher's face contorted even more. Carol, what are you doing? Where's Mariah? I'm right here. I emerged from where I was hiding. At the same time, Carol stood up. Surrounded by the two of us, Christopher looked back and forth between me and Carol, flustered. What are you two up to? Relax. We're not going to lock you up. Just calm down and listen to what Carol has to say. Carol's story? Christopher frowned, and Carol seemed to recoil. But she didn't run away. She opened her mouth and blurted it out. Christopher, you've been deceiving me. I'm going to demand compensation. What? Christopher seemed about to explode with anger, but somehow held back. After watching his reaction, I spoke up. Christopher, let's get a divorce. And of course, you'll be paying compensation to me as well. You too. What's with both of you? You are giving women dreams, right? In return, you accepted their devotion. But it's time to come back to reality. Yes, this was our decision. To impose a financial penalty on Christopher. But it wasn't over yet. Christopher's mobile phone rang. Hello? Dad? It's a bad time. I'll call back later. Apologize to Mariah now? Dad, you can't be serious. I've told Polly and the others everything. Christopher's face turned pale. Then, things moved quickly. Raphael, Polly, rushed over from his family home and fiercely reprimanded his son. I had copied all the documents I received from the detective and sent them to Polly. I've heard it all from Mariah. What kind of person are you? This is the end of our relationship with you. No, Dad. Christopher looked at Polly with tears in his eyes. But Polly's resolve was firm. He ordered Christopher to pay all the compensation to the two women himself. Don't be ridiculous, Dad. Please don't say that. Christopher clung to Polly. Please, I beg you. I'll change. So, can you at least pay half? Be quiet. You're embarrassing. Mariah, I'm sorry. I never thought my son could be this terrible. I'll make sure he has nothing to do with you anymore. Please don't worry about it, Polly. Christopher faced a substantial compensation claim from the lawyer hired by me and Carol and was forced to pay a significant amount. Christopher's misdeeds spread quickly among both families. They whispered about disowning him, and eventually, the gossip reached his workplace. I've been fired from my job. I see. I remained calm and collected. Christopher, with a trembling voice and downcast eyes. I can't pay the compensation, he kept repeating. How can I pay it without a job? I also have been cut off from relatives. There's nothing I can do. That's how I felt, Christopher, when you locked me up. Trapped in the dark, unable to go anywhere or do anything. That feeling of being left in the dark with no way out. Now, Christopher was tasting that same despair. There was another fact Christopher didn't know. Carol was pregnant. I was shocked, but even more, I was happy for her. Congratulations! I know it'll be tough as a single mom, but you can do it. Thank you. I'll try my best to be a good mom. We didn't want Christopher's sins to burden the child. We wished for the child to grow up strong and straightforward, like Carol. I also thought if I hadn't given up on having a child with Christopher, maybe I'd have had another family member. I asked Carol, please let me meet the child when they are born. And saw her off. A child. I intensely wished for one too. Eventually, I decided to adopt once my life was stable. Christopher was gone, so I stayed in the house, and there were part-time jobs available at the nearby grocery store or supermarket. All right, time to gear up. Life felt more vibrant with a purpose. I made friends at work, and the joy of mutual support was new to me, as Christopher had never helped me. Then, here came the long-awaited adoption. The process and preparations were extensive, but I didn't mind. I met her. Not related by blood, but undoubtedly my child. I knew at the moment I saw her. This is the child. Violet recognized me as her mom. Innocently. Mom, she called me. Christopher, you wouldn't understand, but the joy of having a child is immense. This is my revenge. Walking my path with my newfound Violet. Not seeking affirmation from Christopher's sweet nothings. To recognize and believe in myself. As a person, as a mom. You always seem so happy these days, said David, my boss. David was 39. Coincidentally the same age as Christopher. But unlike Christopher, David was unpretentious, earnest, and a bit inept. They were entirely different. Perhaps that's why I could open up to a man of Christopher's age. Mariah, you adapted to work quickly, you're reliable. It's all thanks to your guidance, David, I said with a laugh. David, for some reason, blushed and looked away. Mariah, do you have plans for your next day off? That day. I'm going to the amusement park with Violet. Oh, right. Wouldn't want to intrude. What about the day after? David, what's up? I noticed that. David's gaze towards me was gentle. It seemed unsettled at some point, as if hiding another emotion. Now I understand. It was probably similar to the feelings I once had for Christopher. David took a deep breath and blurted out, Mariah, would you go out with me? And so, David became my partner. At first, Violet was wary, but she warmed up to him after a few meetings. One day, while enjoying afternoon tea with Violet at home, the doorbell rang. Violet cheerfully replied, Coming, and ran to the door. Then returned with a pleased look. It's someone you know, Mom. Who? A tall man. Her words alarmed me. There was only one person that came to mind. I told Violet firmly. Don't come out. A dangerous person? Okay. Violet sensed my tension and looked worriedly at me. It's okay. Mom won't lose. I patted Violet's head and went to the door. As expected, it was him. Who's that kid? His first words weren't even a greeting. Apparently, it was Christopher. What do you want? I asked. I need money, Mariah. You can see, right? Indeed, Christopher looked terrible. He hadn't found a steady job since moving from one acquaintance's house to another. Eventually, he had nowhere to stay and ended up on the streets. I don't have money to lend you. Hey, Mariah. You've gotten pretty arrogant. Think you've beaten me? Life isn't about winning or losing. But Christopher wouldn't understand that. No pity. Just disgust. Christopher took a step closer. Mariah, please. This is the last time. I won't show my face again. I'll go to another state and start over. I just need the money for that. I sighed. His promise to disappear was welcome. But should I help this man? Mom? Then, I heard Violet's voice and footsteps. I turned around in a panic. Don't come here! I told Violet, but she didn't stop. Don't trouble Mom. If it's money you need, I'll give it to you. With that, Violet pressed $1 into Christopher's hand. Christopher stood there, stunned, then collapsed and started crying. A child's innocence. It was the happiness Christopher had once rejected. Violet will start elementary school next year, so we went to look for a school bag. David came along. As the three of us entered the store. What a lovely family. The store manager remarked. Violet beamed proudly, and David and I blushed. Mom, I like this color. Let's see. Violet picked an orange bag. It would suit her lively personality well. Let's consider this a gift from me. Oh, you shouldn't. I attempted to counter David's impromptu gesture. I want to give it from me. Then, I'll consider this as a gift from you too. Violet chimed in cheerfully. David and I looked at each other and nodded in agreement. Sounds good. Yes, let's do that. So we split the cost and bought the new bag together. Being so delighted, Violet didn't let go of the bag all day. Even holding it while sleeping. Meanwhile, David approached me with a certain proposal. About the venue. I don't need a wedding. I didn't have one with my previous husband, and I'm past the age for wedding dresses. That's not true. I want to see you in a wedding dress, Mariah. David insisted. I recalled Christopher, who begrudged even a wedding ring, let alone wedding expenses. David was different. He proposed with a ring. Now, we're saving for the wedding. You want to see Mom in a dress, right? Yes. David had skillfully brought Violet to his side. I could only surrender with a smile. In preparation for the wedding, I embarked on a diet. All the effort paid off when I could wear the dress of my dreams, a moment of immense joy. I couldn't thank David enough for suggesting the wedding. During the ceremony, an emotional David started crying, causing a stir among friends and colleagues. I spent most of the time calming him down, but the ceremony was memorable and fantastic. Afterward, I sold the house I lived in with Christopher. It held memories, but they were all tainted with Christopher's lies. David's apartment was small, but it felt right for our fresh start. The wedding photo took center stage in our new home. David and I smiled awkwardly at the camera. Violet started elementary school. Her bright personality helped her fit in right away. She'd come home and share stories about her friends from school. I came first in the race. That's amazing. Just like David and me. Violet blushed, and so did David. I'm profoundly grateful for meeting these two and becoming a family. My past life revolved around pleasing and depending on Christopher. It was my life, yet it felt like it was lived for Christopher. Now, I'm walking a life for myself. Not just for me. But for David and Violet too, our future shines brightly.